Now with The Rise of Skywalker coming out, I'm continuing my Star Wars reviews with Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. This was a film that I could probably say was the most anticipated film of all time. Everyone was looking forward to Star Wars The Force Awakens. Even me, who had never even seen a single Star Wars movie at that point, even I was excited for this movie when I started seeing the trailers. And having rewatched it just literally last night before reviewing it, I can honestly say this movie holds up spectacularly. In fact, this is one of my favorite Star Wars movies out there, maybe top 2. This movie delivers everything that was great about the originals, but brings some fresh new things as well. For one, this film actually feels like Star Wars. This movie actually not only has some incredible CGI effects, but also some incredible animatronic effects. Which, I'm not saying the animatronics themselves are what make it great, but it's like they're done so well and it feels like it's from the original trilogy but updated for a new audience. And when the movie does go into CGI territories, it's incredible CGI. Of course, any space battle scene is incredible, but even motion capture characters like Lupita Nyong'o's Maz Kanata, she looks so good. Like, she looks actually real and whatnot. Another thing you'll notice in The Force Awakens is that even aesthetically it looks a lot more like Star Wars, and what I mean by that is that with Star Wars Episodes 1 and 2, and even a little bit in Episode 3, they didn't really feel like Star Wars. Everything kind of feels so clean and polished, to where it's like, it almost felt like they went further in time, even though they took place before the original trilogy. In this film, yeah, the technology is still updated a bit, but it does feel more grimy and lived in, like how Star Wars is supposed to feel. Whenever somebody falls down and whatnot, like they actually get dirt on them. Ancient artifacts feel ancient. Ancient temples feel ancient. This film just feels both futuristic and ancient at the same time, which is how Star Wars is supposed to feel. Now let me get into some of the characters. First, let's talk about Finn. This is an incredible character arc in Star Wars. Like, this is a stormtrooper who renounced his ways of being a stormtrooper to fight for the resistance, and I love that. You can see the fear in his eyes knowing what the First Order is able to do, but at the same time you can see that he wants to do a lot of good in this world, especially since Rey became one of the few friends that he ever had. Now let's talk about Kylo Ren. This is honestly one of Star Wars' best villains ever. He might actually go up there with Darth Vader for me, because if you just compare Kylo Ren in The Force Awakens to Darth Vader in A New Hope, Kylo Ren has significantly more depth. I mean, yeah, Darth Vader was cool in A New Hope, but it wasn't until the other movies when you started learning more about him when he became interesting. In The Force Awakens, Kylo Ren is interesting from the start. Just the opening exchange between him and Max von Sydow's character just shows so much history within this guy, and you only learn more about him as the film goes on. In fact, I always kind of like to think of Kylo Ren as what Anakin Skywalker should have been. Anakin Skywalker in the prequel trilogy was whiny, complainy, and was overall just a pathetic little loser. Well, Kylo Ren is that too, but this film emphasizes that whenever he does throw these temper tantrums, he's extremely dangerous, and he will take it out on anything and anyone. This would have been so interesting with Anakin Skywalker, and yet it was just completely wasted. But I am at least glad that they were able to pull it off with Kylo Ren, because this shit is awesome. Now let's talk about Han and Leia in this movie. If you remember my review of The Empire Strikes Back, you'll see that that I wasn't quite on board on how they were building up the romance between him and Leia. I don't know, I just didn't buy these two bickering people as a couple. Return of the Jedi did that a lot better, in my opinion. I feel like it actually did feel like they were a couple. And in The Force Awakens, even though I guess they aren't a couple anymore, you can still tell that they care very much for each other, and that's what I love about that. And now let's get into some of the things that I really do want to defend about this movie, even though everyone wants to hate on them. For one, let's talk about Rey. I don't get the whole Rey's a Mary Sue argument. I think Rey is a fantastic character. Now, is she easily able to feel the Force and work with it a bit? Yeah. I mean, yeah, Rey felt the Force within her as she was flying the Millennium Falcon to try to get away from those TIE fighters. And yeah, she did grab a lightsaber at the end of this movie. And yeah, she was able to manipulate a stormtrooper, even though stormtroopers have been known to have weak minds. I mean, I don't really get why people are complaining about this, because Luke pretty much did the exact same stuff in the original trilogy. Like, in A New Hope, he didn't even train with Obi-Wan for long. Like, what? He maybe worked with a stick, a ball thing? I don't know what it was. Like, it was like this ball that would shoot lasers at him. But it's like, yeah, he didn't train for Obi-Wan for that long, and yet he was somehow able to use the Force and blow up the Death Star. And don't try and tell me that he was already a pilot, because he wasn't. He was going to the academy to try to become a pilot. And same thing with Rey, even though from what I know, I think she might have already been a pilot. Maybe, I don't know. But even if she wasn't, it's just the stuff we saw from Luke before. So I don't know why people are complaining about it with Rey. I mean, look, I'm not saying this is a bad thing towards Luke. I'm really not. It's just the Force just works like that. Like, that's just what I think it is. The Force is just one of those things that's easy to learn, but takes a lifetime to master. I mean, yeah, she is able to maneuver the Millennium Falcon in a very swift way. Yeah, she is able to grab a lightsaber. Yeah, she is able to manipulate the mind of a weak-minded stormtrooper, but all three of those things have been shown pretty early on to be pretty easy to learn in terms of the usage of the Force. Now, some people will say, wait, but she wouldn't know how to use the Force like that. Like, she hasn't, like, the Jedi don't exist anymore. Well, you're forgetting that the Jedi and stuff, the Jedi and the Sith and all that good, and all that cool stuff, those are legends and stories that she was told. And so, having just learned that all of it is real, I think it would kind of make sense that she would try to use Force mind manipulation, which I don't think is that hard to do because, again, stormtroopers have been shown to have very weak minds that are very easy to manipulate. And if I'm not mistaken, Luke was also able to easily grab a lightsaber at the very beginning of The Empire Strikes Back, even though he had never done anything like that before. Again, I'm not calling Luke Skywalker a Mary Sue either. No. I'm just saying that's just how the Force works. The Force is one of those things that, like I said before, is easy to learn, but takes a lifetime to master. So no, I don't think Rey is a Mary Sue at all. It's just, that's just the way the Force works.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. The only reason she was able to beat Kylo Ren at the end of this movie was because Kylo was shot by one of Chewie's crossbows and was literally bleeding and dying in the snow. Kylo Ren was in no shape to fight, and that's how Rey got the upper hand. Back to the rest of the review.
And now let me get to my last thing that I'm going to talk about, and that's Starkiller Base. Once again, I don't really mind Starkiller Base here, because for a couple of reasons. One, keep in mind this was a post-prequel era where we haven't had any more Star Wars movies after, well, actually, technically, we haven't seen any Star Wars movies since the Clone Wars movie, which is, at least right now, the worst reviewed Star Wars movie in all of Star Wars. And yeah, there are those prequel defenders nowadays, but again, most people didn't like the prequels, or at least they didn't like episodes 1 and 2, and they certainly didn't like the Clone Wars movie. This was a time where we needed something familiar from Star Wars so that we can ease into the more different stuff later on. Also, I kind of question the notion that The Force Awakens is a remake of A New Hope just because it has a new Death Star-like thing. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed this, but most Star Wars movies have Death Star-like things in them. Like, we had the Death Star in A New Hope. We had the Death Star again in Return of the Jedi. We had a big Death Star-like thing in The Phantom Menace. We had the Death Star in Rogue One. We had that big spaceship thing in the beginning of Revenge of the Sith, which, yeah, it wasn't a Death Star, but it was still a big thing that the Republic had to go fight. So yeah, I don't get why anyone would say that The Force Awakens is a remake of A New Hope just because it has a Death Star-like thing, because, like I said before, It's just sort of a thing you do in Star Wars. I'm sorry, but Death Star-like MacGuffins are just a thing you do in Star Wars movies. Sort of like in comic book movies, there's usually a portal in the sky. It's just sort of a thing you do in these movies. It's nothing new. It's just kind of a thing they do. And in my opinion, I thought Starkiller Base was even more effective than the Death Star, because whenever they fire Starkiller Base and we actually start to see it in action, we see it from the people's perspective, where in the first film, A New Hope, like, we saw it from the outside perspective, and it was such a quick flash, like, bang, like, there wasn't really much of an impact. In this, it kind of drags on so that it lets you feel and just totally experience what this thing's actually doing. And so, again, seeing it from a first-person perspective, I feel like it works a lot better. So yeah, I love The Force Awakens a bunch. Like, this movie is so good. I thought it had fantastic character development, an incredible aesthetic to it, especially visual effects wise. The music is great. This film is overall, like I said, one of my favorite Star Wars movies. Top 2 at least. So yeah, if you haven't already, even though I'm surprised you haven't already if you haven't. Man, that's a lot of haven'ts, isn't there? But anyways, check it out for yourself and tell me what you think.